Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to break down what feels like a cheat code for the stock market. And look, it has nothing to do with getting lucky or making some crazy bet. It's all about understanding one simple thing: time.
So let's just dive right in with a big one. A question almost everyone asks at some point: is the stock market basically just a giant casino? And it's easy to see why it feels that way, right? But what if I told you the odds are actually, believe it or not, stacked in your favor, if you just know how to play the game?
You see, there are really two different games happening in the market at the same time. On one side, you've got the short-term gambler. They're glued to the news, they're on this emotional roller coaster, and honestly, it usually just ends in a loss. But on the other side, you have the long-term investor. They're calm, they're focused on how real businesses are actually growing, and that is the path where patience literally turns into profit. So let's talk about that first approach for a second, because understanding the psychology of panic is probably the most important step to avoiding it. This is really where most people go wrong. Okay, so this is the classic fear trap. Picture this. You invest your money, and for a couple of months, everything's looking great. Then, bam! The market has a bad day, a bad week, and all you see is red on the screen. The panic starts to creep in. So you sell, right? You tell yourself you're stopping the bleeding, but what you've actually done is you've made a temporary, on-paper loss permanent. You walk away thinking the game is rigged, when really, you just quit before the final whistle. So how do we avoid falling into that trap? Well, it's not about trying to be a genius and outsmarting the market. It's actually way simpler. It's about using the right tools to own a small piece of the entire economic engine. Look, instead of trying to find that one magic needle in a haystack, what if you could just buy the whole haystack? That's exactly what a market index lets you do. So you take something like the S&P 500. That's a single investment that gives you a piece of the 500 biggest, most important companies in America. Or the NASDAQ 100, which is similar, but it's really focused on the 100 largest non-financial companies. So think technology, innovation, that kind of stuff. You're not just betting on one player anymore. You're betting on the whole team. And here's the absolutely brilliant part about this. These indexes are kind of like self-cleaning engines. Every few months, they automatically kick out the companies that are starting to struggle, and they bring in the new rising stars. You don't have to lift a finger or do any research. The index does the hard work for you, making sure it's always full of the strongest companies out there. All right, so what is this magic number, this threshold that can turn what feels like a total gamble into a pretty predictable investment? Well, this brings us right to the core idea of this whole explainer, the 5-year rule. Think about it like this. In the short term, day to day, the market is just a chaotic popularity contest. It's totally driven by fear, by hype, by the news cycle. It's all emotion. But once you stretch your timeline out to 5 years or more, all of that noise just fades away. The market becomes a weighing machine. And on that machine, only one thing has any weight at all: which companies are actually making money. And you don't have to take my word for it. The data proves it. If you invest for just a single year, you have roughly a 1 in 4 chance of losing money. That feels like a gamble. But if you stretch that out to any 5-year period in history, your chance of making a profit, of having a positive return, jumps to nearly 90%. And that's true across decades of data, through crashes and crises and everything in between. All of a sudden, the odds are just overwhelmingly on your side. It's simple, really. Math beats emotion. Okay, this is where it gets really, really exciting. Let's actually look at the numbers and see how all this patience pays off, thanks to this incredible force called compounding. So let's just imagine for a second that you start with $50,000. You put it into a broad market index fund, and you just commit to leaving it alone. You commit to being patient. Now, historically, the S&P 500 has returned about 10% a year on average. So if you leave that 50 grand in for 15 years,
It could grow to over $210,000. And that's not just your initial money growing. It's your earnings that start making their own money. That's the magic of compounding.
But now, what if you happen to invest during a really strong period for the economy? Maybe one with 15% average returns. Well, that same $50,000 could balloon into $400,000. You didn't do a single thing different. You didn't get smarter. You just bought the engine and you let time do all the heavy lifting for you. And the best part is you don't have to be some kind of genius who can predict the future. The smartest strategy is actually the simplest one. It's called dollar cost averaging. All it means is you invest the same amount of money on the regular schedule, say every month. When the market is down, your money automatically buys more shares. When the market is high, it buys a little less. It completely takes the guesswork and, more importantly, the emotion out of the equation. Okay, so that's the big idea and the math behind it. But what does this actually look like in practice? Let's break down the simple, actionable steps you can take on your own patient path forward. So here it is, the whole strategy boiled down. First, you have to commit to at least 5 years. That's the price of admission, no exceptions. Second, you invest consistently, whether the market is up or down. Third, and this is probably the hardest one, you have to learn to tune out the daily noise from the news. And fourth, you put it all into practice using simple, low-cost index funds. These are usually called ETFs, and a couple of popular examples are VOO, which tracks the S&P 500, or QQQM, which tracks that tech-heavy NASDAQ 100 we talked about. When you really get down to it, this is all about a huge shift in your mindset. Success in investing isn't about having some secret knowledge or finding the next big thing before anyone else. It's just about discipline and patience. If you can truly understand and commit to the 5-year rule, you've already set yourself up to do better than the vast majority of other investors out there. So the real question isn't whether the market works, it's whether you can be patient enough to let it work for you.